Welcome to the virtual Happy Half Hour for May 21st. We'll be getting started in just a minute. We're going to let folks join into the webinar. And while folks are joining, just a reminder that we will be recording today's session and we will send it out to participants after the webinar later today. If you have questions about our topic throughout our time, please feel free to enter those in the chat or the Q&A. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, the virtual Happy Half Hour for Friday, May 21st. Our topic is sales coaching after a life-changing year. So obviously it has been a crazy, more than a year, probably more like 14 months so far. And we know that our teams have changed, we ourselves have changed. And so we're really excited to address this topic with you today. And we are sponsored by the Brooks Talent Index, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. This is a great tool for really understanding how your team has changed and perhaps how you have changed and those implications for sales coaching. I am joined by my partner, as always, Russ Scherer, our Director of Sales Strategy Effectiveness. Welcome, Russ.
Thanks, Michelle. Always great to be with you. I was just thinking, if a baker's dozen is 13, what do you call 14? I mean, is it like the chef's dozen for COVID, or what's the number that they've kind of given us as a capability? And we are joined today by Juan Kingsbury. Juan is not only the founder of Career Blind Spot, he hosts the podcast Career Blind Spot. And you're going to love Juan. His energy level, the insights that he brings. He spends his time working with folks in the marketplace. And really his kind of catch slogan is that he helps to eliminate workplace excuses. So he's going to come at this from how do we work with our employees, with our teams to make sure they're in good spots so that they can go out and successfully produce, successfully execute with us. But one thing we want to start there is there's a lot of data that's coming out about how this pandemic and lockdown has affected people. And so, Michelle, you've pulled a couple of pretty key stats.
Yes, thanks, Russ. Yeah, how has the last year changed us? So obviously our topic today is coaching tips after a life-changing year. What does that actually mean? Well, I did find some stats, and 69% of workers say the coronavirus pandemic is the most stressful time of their entire professional career. That's greater than or more than September 11th. And the 2008 Great Recession, which I think was also kind of a watershed milestone for many of us who had to work through that. That stat is from the Human Resource Executive magazine, and that's dated April 2020. So let's think about that for a minute. 69%, almost 70% of workers were saying this back in April 2020, and that's when we thought this was only going to last like 8 weeks. So now we're 14 months in, and it is one of the most stressful times. And it really does. I think the last year has touched on some of the most stressful events, really thinking about, impacts to our jobs, to our health, to our relationships. So it's, I think that makes sense. The other stat that we have is that 1 in 4 workers is planning to look for new opportunities or opportunities with a new employer once the threat of this pandemic has subsided. So 25% of our workforce is going to be looking for a new job. And so I think that's, we're kind of edging out of this pandemic now. So I think we're going to expect to see quite a bit of turnover. And, the research is showing that in part that's due to individuals who have upskilled, right? So they've spent the last year or so focusing on their own skills and also looking for more flexibility. Employees have gotten used to working remotely, for having more flexibility in their work and personal lives, and or maybe seeking that in new opportunities. So there's a lot happening in the workforce, a lot of these factors at play. And so as as sales leaders, how do we address that with our teams? So if we know that these dynamics are happening, what does that mean? And so, Juan, why don't you tell us what you're seeing out there?
Yeah, it's that the change is constant, to paraphrase a cliche, or just to say it, I guess. And what I'm seeing is I think people are denying reality that, people's lives are changed. And even if your business didn't change at all, your clients probably did. And let's take it away from just people and the coaching. If you found out one of your top clients, companies just absorbed like 3 of their competition, that would be like, whoa, something's different. Or they just laid off 20% of their business. You'd call that a significant event. And what I'm seeing is that people, especially for ourselves, but also the managers and leaders or aspiring, are not always accepting that human beings have significant emotional events. Now, here's some common ones: marriage, divorce, becoming a parent for the first time, second time, third time, fourth time, depending on how many kids you want. Or even when you become a parent, having a baby is one thing. They're cute, terrible twos. They're sweet again at 4, and then they're 13 and they're talking back. They're 25 and they come back and maybe need some help. The job title stays, but people shift. You have these events. And so that's just pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, pre-everything 2020. And so what I see is that there are those leaders who are adapting to things are changing. We had to pivot. Let's go. And then I see a lot of people who don't want to accept that. Like I'm calling here from Phoenix. It's nice and cool. I don't know, 81 degrees. When it's 90, it's still cold. 100, still cold. But you come to Phoenix in the summer and you expect a cool breeze, you're not, accepting reality. And so things have changed. Your people have changed. Maybe even if nothing at your company changed, your top salesperson, maybe her husband got laid off. Maybe became a mom, or all these other things. And so taking your temperature of yourself, did you go through change? Do you have, bless the parents who are also, who pull double duty as teachers, we new empathy on that regard. So I can go on and on, but that's the biggest thing, is that there's been significant emotional events and what we can do about that. And I'll let you ask some questions and I'll associate the answer, which is have good, effective emotional intelligence, or EQ, or sales skills. To me, they're one and the same, similar skills, but they're going to get you to the right outcome in a constructive, responsible way. You're going to take responsibility for what you can control, but also realize other people are bringing their feelings and priorities to the table.
So Juan, I'm curious, when we do assessments, we work with our clients, there's a number of sciences that we apply to that. We look at their behaviors, we look at their motivators, we look at their emotional intelligence, right? What if you're a leader of a team, particularly sales leaders, should you be looking for that's going to help you get a sense for how they've changed? And obviously some change is good, right? So we want to be able to recognize the bad change, or the dangerous change, if you will. And so what are they kind of keeping their eyes on? And then when do they need to speak up?
Yeah, I think more pragmatically, or I should say practically, is consider the role. Did you have a bunch of salespeople who were more farmers? Like, hey, that works. We just gotta take orders, nudge people every couple of weeks, take them to lunch. Okay, cool. But the well has dried up. We got to go find new business. Now your role is actually more hunting. And so the ideal disc profile and ideal motivators, not completely different, but it shifts. You need someone who's a little bit more hungry, or as the kids say, thirsty for new sales, because they get to collect theirs. Or vice versa. Maybe it's, we don't need new business. We just need to take care of the ones we have now, because if we go in, we just, with our product or whatever it is. So that's the first thing I'd look at, is what is our ideal? If you know these tools, the disc and motivator, I just stick with there. EQ, you can't necessarily hire for, at least don't recommend. Because even if you score well, it's not necessary. There's a lot of people who don't have great EQ who could still do a pretty decent job. But make sure, or I should say, not make sure, just ask the question. Ideally, what do I need? If I need a hunter, is that going to be more high D? And there's hunter roles that need high C. You're selling technical, it's big ticket. You can't afford to round up the wrong zero or carry the one improperly. So that's the first thing I'd look at. is the profile, or as we call it, benchmark. The second thing is I look at, hey, these individuals, like, you got 10 of them, you got 50 of them. Well, they're all going to bring their own disc and motivators to the table. Whether or not you assess them 5 years ago, they're still going to bring their behaviors and motivators to the table. Or let's rephrase that: their biases, their tendencies, their preferences. Pop quiz question: what's the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat? Thermometer tells you the temperature. Thermostat helps you adjust it. And I definitely will need that in Phoenix now. Actually, it's already on. But if you are not reading the right temperature and you're trying to adjust it, well, I'm going to have a really bad energy bill. And so by looking at the assessment, like, hey, do I have, actually, that graph right there, those of you who are needing hunters, that's what you're looking for. A lot of D, some I, a lot of utilitarian. That's that gold bar, and that black bar, individualistic. Right. This person is just wired to go out there, find new business, get theirs, have the chit chat as it serves the purpose, and move on to the next one. Now there's skills and other stuff that matter, but you might have, maybe your top person is no longer utilitarian. Now I doubt that it's completely gone, but maybe, let's take this person as an example, you can see that little teal one, that blue, or teal, I should say, social. Maybe that popped up for some reason. Maybe they came incredibly altruistic. I don't know, and maybe you don't know either. But if you don't see them hungry for new business and you see them, they're always helping their friends move, or they're always training the new person. Why are they leaning that way? Well, their motivators got shifted. And we can try to explain that, but that's not what we're trying to figure out right now. You're trying to get sales. Well, read the right temperature first. So I'm biased, reassess, but at least ask the question and don't waste your time trying to appeal to someone who is no longer utilitarian. Appeal to what they actually care about.
Yeah. And we talk about COVID a lot. We talk about selling at social distance, but there's been a lot of stressors over the last 12 to 14 months in our North America and in our society. And so all of those things can create change, whether it's the movements, the election, whatever it might be, all of those kind of happen. What's your recommendation in terms of, you talk about people being in different roles and kind of being stressed in that, but what about when they decide they just want to make a change? Back to Michelle's data that 25% of people are thinking of leaving their job. If one of your great producers comes to you and says, hey, I've just decided that we're going to go live off the grid in the New Mexico mountains. As a manager, and in many cases with some kind of a relationship, do you recommend that they just say, hey, yeah, go for it? Or should they live into it? Like spend a little time kind of thinking about that? How does that play?
In that there's a lot there, but I think if someone just kind of comes to that conclusion and it's like, hey, I'm out, gonna go do this, whatever they're doing, that says like, wow, they probably were thinking about for a while and you didn't have the trust level with them for them to even bounce it off of you. I'm not saying I'm a better person, but 10 years ago when I quit my job, I gave like 6 months notice. I just thought of it on the spot, but I trusted the people around me and I didn't want to leave them hanging. So, not saying it's a reflection of you, but at least it's a reflection of the relationship that someone's just springing this on you. But I think to more of what Russ is asking is like, do you fight for them? And hey, it's probably less time and energy to take a current performer, keep them as a high performer versus start out all over again and go back to the single dating market and seeing where there's a fit. So I'd fight, or at least ask questions. I wouldn't. I'd want to know what was the why. Again, going back to motivators. No offense, DISC. I love you, DISC, but motivators is engaging. You can adapt your DISC style. When I go to church, I had to take my eye very low. I can't give the sermon. I got to listen one. But I can't compromise my own utilitarian and individualistic.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like getting antsy because I'm like, is this a good use of my time and I better for this? Anything. Think of elementary school, college, the military. You can't compromise your motivators. You can adapt your DISC. Now, adapting still is energetic, but my point being, those motivators, if that person feels good about their decision, they're probably like, yeah, I'm going to go move to New Mexico. It's awesome. And we're just going to meditate and drink matcha tea. Maybe their aesthetic has come up since, they're really into that stuff. But if it's more out of obligation, like I gotta go, my wife, or my husband's family and blah, blah, blah. And not to say it's bad, but oh, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. They're going out of obligation versus excitement, which again, the answer, or at least a big part of it, is gonna come in their motivators. And so if you want to keep them, ideally you want to appeal to their motivators a lot more than this big move that they're about to make. So taking New Mexico, let's take this. If you're going to lose your top salesperson, whatever reason they're thinking, it is a better investment of my time, utilitarian, and my life, my self-preservation, individualistic, if I go move. Maybe I'm burnt out. Actually, this is a little bit off topic, but watch out. If you had high performers in 2020 and you haven't given them massages or whatever's appropriate and whatever, they're burnt out because they've stepped up, and maybe it's you, but that might be why they're going to go live off grid, because they're putting their health before commission.
Great point. So I want to kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about not the dramatic changes of I'm going to quit my job and change my lifestyle and everything else, but just those people who are still in the game and still moving forward, still working. But first, we need to hear from our sponsor. So Michelle, you want to give us a word from the Brooks Talent Index?
Absolutely. And I think Juan has teed us up very nicely for this. Juan's been talking about behavior styles and motivators and understanding what's happening with your team. And our Brooks Talent Index is a whole person assessment. So if you really do want to understand how your team is interacting with each other and with clients, what's driving individual performance, are they utilitarian, right? Are they, have they shifted to really want that retreat in the hills of New Mexico? This is a good tool to be able to do that. So our Brooks Talent Index can really unlock how a person communicates, how they will sell, how they will manage others, why they will manage others, why they will sell, right? So what rewards are they looking for on the job in their personal lives to be fulfilled, as well as their overall personal skills and their level of emotional intelligence, right? So what's their level of self-awareness and social awareness with others? So if you're interested in learning more, these assessments are validated for hiring. We can also use them in the training process. And as we are talking about today, for coaching, how do you get the most out of your team? Where are we right now? What's the current state? And how do we get more out of them through coaching? So if you're interested in learning more, maybe even taking it for a test drive, getting a comp assessment, then please email contact@thebrooksgroup.com.
I'll tack on, if you've already assessed, I know I kind of was like, if they're old, you need to reassess. I'm biased, have good information. But even if you have something from 2011 and you're looking to keep that person or get more, go use that. Go start somewhere. One of my biggest pet peeves as a utilitarian individualistic guy who hates workplace excuses, when I know a manager is dealing with the problem and I'm like, you got that person's assessment, pull that stuff out, man, and just look at, you already paid for it, compounding interest. Use it every day, and you might not have time for it. It's not about memorizing the assessment. It's about applying it so you can move the needle where it counts. So even if you just have a disc, even if it's from 10, 20 years old, go pull that out. Be the person who gets the accurate measurement of the human being you're trying to engage, and start dealing with some actual metrics that can help you. So fresh data is always better, but any data is a good start.
All right, thanks for that reminder. And by the way, if you have questions, you're welcome to either use the Q&A form or the chat window, and we will be glad to address those. So just share those with us. But Juan, I want to move now to the sort of less dramatic, right? Look, sales is a high pressure job usually. It's a pressure job. Sometimes it's a high pressure job. And a lot of folks that we work with are coming back not only off pandemic, but global supply chain issues in terms of what's available, lots of price increases flowing through that we're seeing from companies. How does a leader who needs to make his number know how hard to push and when to sort of back off so that you don't break the team?
That's a good question. It really depends on your industry environment. Like I remember actually with one of the clients with Brooks, um, selling private planes, and you only had to sell 2 a year, and it's a little different than having to get 20 new clients a week. And in that role, it was more high S, desirable, more aesthetic, I believe. But you would take home a nice payday when you sold those 2 planes every year. I'm sure that job changed as well during the pandemic. But basically, how much you have to push, I'd say push all the way, but make sure you're pushing in the right regard. Like I always think of the movie Glengarry Glen Ross. And not everyone's seen it, but it's a play as well. But always be closing. I'm not saying do what that character did, but what that character didn't do was realize, oh, I'm pushing all of this on the wrong people. And so you either got to be like, well, I got to get some new people, or I got to make up for these gaps. That's your decision to make. But aside from the people, I'd be more like, what do we actually need to do? What do I need to do? Any boss can yell and micromanage and do those things. But if you're actually trying to reap the fruit, understand where do I need to push? Actually, I'll pose it. I think you said they can talk in the chat. As a sales manager coach, what is your biggest problem with your people? Is it they're too sleepy, they're not communicating, etc. But I wouldn't be too passive. Now, what you can do is be more empathetic. Be assertively empathetic. That's how I'll sum it up. Don't wait for them to tell you how they're feeling and doing. Ask them, and make sure they know this is our finish line and this is how far away we are from it. What are we going to do about it? And oh, you have no utilitarian, but you're all theoretical. All right, I got to get you rereading Sales Skills Index, or I got to get you, what book do you think would help you close this gap? So be assertively empathetic is the main thing. What is the biggest problem as a manager that you face with your people, as a coach, as a mentor? Feel free to put that in the chat, and if I can connect it, we will.
Yeah, go ahead if you would, if you've got those issues, and just chat them out.
Yeah. Actually, oh man, Celeste, that's a great one. No energy, enthusiasm. And that goes back to what I was saying about high performers. Not to say that all burnt out people were high performers, but it's. I mean, I've been there before. I'm talking like this year, definitely last year. That energy, if it is lacking, that means the job that they're doing isn't directly incentivizing them. Utilitarian individual. I don't have any people to sign up. I can't get them. I want it. I'm hungry, but now I'm starving. So eventually that depletes your energy. But that's why I go back to those motivators. Know what would excite someone. I understand you're jaded, you're burnt out, or maybe you're just lazy. You can call them names you want. But if you knew their motivators, you at least have more than a puncher's chance to re-engage that energy, especially if you're like, well, this is 100% sales commission. Oh, but they're aesthetic social. They never saw sales as competition. This is all abundance mentality. So if you want to relight their fire or help them anyway, and I think good sales management is all about giving them the fish or teaching them to fish, but help them realize what actually motivates them. Connectivity, communication.
Can I jump in on that last one? Just one really quick.
Please.
One of the things I've seen, and not necessarily a scientific correlation, but just kind of looking at things is, as you mentioned, we like high individualistic for salespeople because they want to drive and control a lot of aspects of their life. They are the ones who are least interested in working in Zoom because they feel the most boxed in, right?
Yeah.
And so I've seen a correlation. Obviously, high I's with that, like, I want to get out, I want to meet people, I want to press the flesh. Those folks are frustrated by Zoom, but the motivator behind that is sort of like, I got to do it my way. I want to be me. I want to bring my charisma as opposed to my charisma to transactions.
Oh yeah.
So that's another thing I think to look at.
Yeah. I'll speak to that too, especially if you have people who are like burned out on the virtual. I am one of them. This is definitely not my element. I can run my mouth and get engaged, but it's not the same. And if you look at my very eclectic background, I get to show it off. My aesthetic wife helped me do that, and I put my art up. But that's a supplement. It's like I'm lacking vitamin D. I'm taking a supplement. This is not the same as going to a venue and being on stage and shaking hands and putting on, the clothes that make me feel good. But what I can do is I can control my environment. And then what we're actually getting into now, more personal accountability and acceptance of reality. What can and cannot what can you and cannot change about the environment? Those individual, that's a big one, Russ, and we could do follow up.
Yeah.
But
And-
those people are all about what's in it for me. And basically a year of Zoom is draining. So that's hard, but they need to make that decision. Was it WIIFM? If you are trying to re-engage that energy and you have these individualistic people who are looking for their promotion, their pay raise, anything, like it's almost like a little bit of a judo move, but like you need to get them to decide, hey, I know you don't like being home at Zoom, but how can you make it better? Yeah. Can you go to a co-working space? Can you go somewhere where you feel comfortable and are going to impress the client? What can you do? I know, hey, your dog might bark. Well, what can you do about that? Can you somehow, maybe the client loves dogs. Bring that little puppy on the screen. But that's what it is their motivators are not just not being satisfied. They're burnt out because they've had to compromise them for a long, long time.
I think that ties to Jay's point too about confidence and their dedication to the goals. If you feel like you haven't been in control and you've been fighting this, like, I want control, I need control. My motivator is not an I want, it's an I need, right? Yeah. And you feel like you haven't been able to control anything. Now you may be wondering, can I control anything? Can I get to my number?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, especially, I'm going to start over, go to New Mexico or join this competitor or whatever it is. If you have individualistic people, which if you have good salespeople, it's a good chance you do. It's nothing personal, at least towards you. It's for them. It's self-preservation. They are doing something that they believe is in their best interest. And I'll be a little funny here, but I always resisted CrossFit because I was like, this is stupid. Just go to the gym, eat right. No, it's because I'm bad at CrossFit, or at least I'm not as good as the other people I go with it. Individualistic people, our ego fuels us, but it also gets in our own way. And that's true of all the motivator style. But if you're sales, if you have people who normally thrive in a selling environment where they had to go, hunt what they kill, well, they've been pent up. We've all seen the killer whale with the dorsal fin flipped over. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it actually can come back up, but like literally the environment, we severely underestimate the environmental impact on us, not just from an assessment standpoint, but, imagine if you were living with your parents during 2020, or you were living with that brother you don't get along with. The environment changes and your team is either thriving under it or they're not. And actually, I'll go binary. I'm not a big fan of binary, 1 or 0, good or evil. But I strongly believe during this, we're either thriving or we're not. And the individualistic person is either winning or they're losing. Help them see it and take responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. That as leaders and managers, there's things we can control and things we can't, right? There's things we can see, there's things we can't. So give your team sort of that ability to see the things that they can control and they can do, and ideally those are going to lead in the right way. Another one. Hey, thanks. By the way, we got some good feedback in terms of questions. Do you want to handle this connectivity communication one?
Yeah, and I'll piggyback up. Like, it's one thing to be like, hey, Juan, you need to take care of yourself. Well, just like kids watch their parents. Well, what's the manager doing? Are you taking the medicine on EQ? Are you using your disc and motivators? And hey, you might. Not everyone's going to follow suit. But if you don't at all, you're setting the stage. And that ties into confidence and connectivity. To me, the managers, the leaders who are taking the weekend and recharging or going on vacation, those lucky enough to do so, and coming back energized versus, hey, I escaped a little bit, now it's back to the grind. You're setting the stage. And so when you connect, realize it's, not to go too much on virus and passing stuff, but you're going to pass whatever vibe juju you have. And so if you have a bunch of negative people, I'm not saying you are negative, but how you connect with them. And really, we're just talking about good EQ. And another way we can even get meta is, if you've not sold your people on taking accountability, then maybe you need to go back into the process and do some investigating, consider how you're meeting with them, probe a little bit more before you start applying those hard deadlines. And that's why I say aggressively empathize, investigate, meet, probe with your people, because you might be making a lot of assumptions and they're receiving it one way.
Boy, great point. I was with a client this week and we talked about how the process of selling and the process of bringing cultural change in an organization are almost the same, right? Listen, set in terms of what kind of that goal or future or the desired outcomes are going to be, and then celebrate when you see those kinds of things happening in a culture. And if you understand their motivators, you can reward the times when they take steps forward and are able to use those motivators. I think that's a great one. Our time is nearly up here. Let me kind of give you the 4 takeaways that I got from today, and then Juan would appreciate any kind of final thoughts or comments. Number 1, I loved what you said when you said, don't deny reality. Your people have changed. You have changed. Don't just think like it's the way it used to be. And your customers have changed, right? We didn't get a chance to talk about this as it relates to customers, but that's there too. Number 2, the more that a role has changed from what it was in, let's say, February 2020 to today, the more opportunity there is for stress or issues or changes. And I'm gonna jump on the line here to say, and that role doesn't just mean your work role. As you said, it might be your home role, it might be your parenting role, it might be how you care for your parents. There's a lot of caregiving that's gone on. So look at how the roles have changed. Number 3, watch for people who performed really well last year, who went hard at it because they may be burned out. And then number 4, managers, model what you want. Don't make this a do what I say, and make this a do what I do kind of experience. So those are my 4 takeaways. Any final thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. And picking up where the model, and it might be scary and hard, because if you're depressed or overly anxious or frustrated and you haven't made your number, like that is the unfortunate reality. But also, why does it really upset you? Well, oh, you know what? I'm not utilitarian, but I'm individualistic, and I usually thrive because my team was thriving. But to get clear on the why, I always ask, why do most people go to work? Pay bills, kids, all the stuff. Why do happy people go to work? They like doing what they're doing. There's a big lift here, which is all about DISC and motivators. So I'll sum up in saying that those significant events, they happen all the time. You knew people got divorced, married, all the stuff. And if you were not just empathetic, but an effective sales manager, you factored those in. I'm not saying you held their hand and you hugged them and all those things that friends do, but you at least acknowledged that the weather changed. So significant events were aplenty in 2020, and for many people still in 2021. And Russ, you're right, we didn't hit on this nearly enough, but your customers. So we were talking mainly about your people that you're coaching, but your customers probably have been through significant emotional events. And really EQ and sales skills, and I'm kind of patchworking this, but EQ is the soft stuff of like, hey, how do me and Russ collaborate so I can get him to do what I need him to do? Sales is more of the mechanics, the investigate, meet, probe, etc. You can get pretty effective with just doing impact selling or whatever system. But if you're having to deal with emotions, then EQ is only going to enhance that concept if you're looking to basically rise spirits and get new results. So leave it at that.
And I'm going to jump in here real quick too and just say that, we've been talking about motivators, we've been talking about DISC, we've been talking about really understanding your team. And I think a lot of these coaching points really are dependent on understanding, what's that baseline? What does your team look like? Where are they currently? And how then can you use that knowledge to move them along and to coach them? And again, if we can help you with that, and the Brooks Talent Index is a fabulous tool for really level setting and helping you pinpoint your sales coaching, please let us know. contact@thebrooksgroup.com. I mean, those are the graphs that we were looking at in this the previous slide that Juan has been referring to, and it really can unlock the power of your sales coaching.
Well, Juan, thank you very much for your insights. I'm sure we could go on for much more, many more hours. But again, if we can help, as Michelle said, reach out to us. at contact@theberksgroup.com. Our next virtual happy half hour, June 11th. So 3 weeks from today, we will be almost at the end of the second quarter. So we'll see where what the world looks like at that point.
Wonderful.
Until then, thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.